Good evening and welcome to the very last Mary Trump show of 2022, a year I am so happy to put in the rearview mirror. With me, I'm really happy to have Jennifer Rubin, Washington Post columnist, author most recently of Resistance, How Women Saved Democracy from Donald Trump, and another, how they're going to have to keep doing it, I think. Jen, it's so good to see you. I really appreciate your being here in the middle of a holiday.
Nice to be here. I must confess, I've been a little bit unplugged. And, as soon as you do that and you become a civilian again, you sort of get some perspective on life.
Yeah, I can only imagine. No, I have to do that actually because, and it's okay because I more than talking about what's been going on, I kind of wanted to talk about where we've been and maybe end with what we're looking forward to.
Great.
It has once again been something of a year.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was possible that for the no, since 2016, I didn't think it was possible that I would still be in a position to say next year can't possibly be worse,
Right.
and then have it be worse. So I'd like to end that very bad cycle.
I kind of felt that the end of 2022 was sort of good. Maybe I'm being Pollyannish about it, but between the midterms and Zelensky coming and the economy seeming to, kind of settle where it's supposed to be, and a lot of hoopla celebrating Nancy Pelosi's career, which has been magnificent.
Yeah.
I feel a little bit up, which is always dangerous because my expectations get raised and, disaster is right around the corner. But I'm feeling better about 2022 than I was about 2021. And part of it certainly is the January 6th committee and the walls closing in on the former guy. And part of it is that the Republicans have gone from scary to ridiculous. They've gone, from Donald Trump to George Santos. And I think, they're in danger of becoming the butt of a lot of people's jokes. So listen, buffoons can be dangerous too. Everyone thought Hitler was a buffoon. Everyone thought Mussolini was a buffoon. So you got to watch it. But
Right.
I still am feeling a little bit better.
Actually, I hear it in your voice, and that makes me feel better because, this will surprise people perhaps, but I am by nature a very optimistic person, and that's been severely challenged in the last 6 years, for all of the reasons. And I kind of don't trust myself to be hopeful anymore. So when other people whose opinions and perspectives I respect say, this year was certainly better than it could have been, and it bodes well for next year, I'll take it. Because as good as 2022 was in some ways, it also feels like we've been put through the ringer again.
Yes.
Right? Unlike the tens of thousands of people I had to deal with at airports and on airplanes last week, COVID is still a thing. And I'm thrilled. Actually, you know what? I was probably the only Democrat disappointed by the midterms because I thought we were going to do better. Everybody was like just anticipating total disaster. So the midterms were phenomenal. I mean, I think we can say that they were an absolute debacle for the Republican Party. On the other side of that, though, is how untenable it is to head into every election cycle feeling like the fate of the planet depends on the results.
Exactly.
Right?
And, everything that doesn't get done before the Republicans get into power is a potential catastrophe. They didn't solve the debt ceiling problem. So that looms, we get a meltdown of the entire economy. They got some things done. They got the Electoral Count Act reform done, which I think was very good. They got funding for Jack Smith and the Justice Department, at least through the end of September. Very good.
Yeah.
They got another batch of funding for Zelensky and the Ukrainians. Very good. But you have to wonder and worry that everything that has not been done will, of course, be a disaster, because the Republicans now combine complete destructiveness with complete incompetence. So it is a very, you really feel like, the Senate and the White House are going to have to keep us from going off the cliff. It's gotten so bad, even the Republicans in the Senate have contempt for the Republicans in the House. That's how bad it's gotten.
And that's really saying something. But it's sort of a perfect description: destructive and ridiculous. And the ridiculous can be very dangerous in their destructiveness. It also sounds a lot like a good description of Donald Trump. But I think the good news is that I think Donald is much less of a threat to America than he is to the Republican Party.
I agree with that. And, I'm curious what your take is, since you are the expert on all things Donald. Do you think, I know it's hard to say he's decomposed more, but do you think he is decomposing more readily now that the prosecution seems so imminent and he is no longer, the newest novelty for the Republican Party? He just seems so pathetic.
Yeah, it's really funny. I just wrote an article for the New Republic about kind of what his month, what his December was like, but what it means if we allow the Republicans to pretend that Donald's the problem, and they use his latest troubles and his latest embarrassments, like the non-fungible digital trading card nonsense, as an off ramp to pretend, oh, it's just him, we're fine, because they're not fine.
Yeah.
And what's funny is that I had said, I'd written that watching, not that anybody should have pity for Donald at all. He's a terrible person and he's destroyed lives. But watching him decompensate publicly is that's not good for anybody. It's just, he was the leader, shockingly and tragically, he was the leader of the free world. He was the most powerful person on the planet. He's still the most powerful Republican in the country, which makes him one of the most powerful people in the country. And my editor changed decompensate to decompose, which is a word you just used. And I didn't catch it. And then I was like, well, actually watching him decompose publicly would be very troubling. But he's definitely decompensating. And it's an interesting wordplay, because I guess in some ways he's probably decomposing too. I mean, certainly his support is eroding, and it is, I'm always loath to say, yeah, it's over, because I end my piece by saying, yeah, the walls are closing in, but they've been closing in for 5 decades and they're still open. So I don't think we can ever count him out, unfortunately. But there's definitely you can see it in how tiny his world has become. You can see it in his isolating himself in a way that doesn't have anything to do with COVID. And his weird bouts of temper tantrums on whatever it's called, and his weird bouts of silence. So
he doesn't even go out. He's not even having his rallies, which he used to live for. This was like the thing that, drove him. He's that isolated. And someone put it really well. I'm not sad for him. I'm sad that we ever had this person as president of the United States. This mess of a human being, this broken soul, this broken personality that millions upon millions of people not only voted for him once, but voted for him twice. Yes, 74 million people voted for him a second time. And you just come back to it again and again. What is it with Americans? Blindness, identification, kind of a nihilism, burn it all to the ground. If my life isn't great, yours is going to be worse. It's really still confounds me that people are still supporting these people when all but the most deluded must know that this is all, lies and delusions and conspiracies.
Yeah, Jen, I'm really glad that you put it in those terms, because as you and I and many other people have been saying, Donald's a symptom. He's not he is a problem, but he is not the cause of
Right.
things, right? So it's elected Republicans who definitely know better, right? They know, for example, that George Santos isn't Jewish, that he's a liar, compulsive, he's a potentially a thief. He's just the terror, and they're going to seat him anyway, right? So clearly, elected Republicans, Republican leadership are the problem, but they're the people who continue to vote for and empower the Greg Abbotts of the world, not despite their cruelty, not despite the fact that they endangered the lives of men, women, and children who were here legally seeking asylum. They like it. They like it when white men like Greg Abbott use their power to essentially traffic these people over state lines and dump them in the freezing cold in front of Vice President Harris's house just because it's fun for them. And that's what worries me more than anything. You're right. Is it? And I believe this is the case. It is something in the fabric of this country that we have never addressed. And to your earlier point, are we perhaps at this tipping point where, on the one hand, we have people paying attention, and we've talked about this before, people paying attention to concepts like democracy, people not comfortable with election denial, with the big lie, with insurrection. And then on the other hand, people just being so completely mortified by a party that thinks the best use of their time is to bring back the Benghazi hearings or to make sure that Elon Musk posts naked pictures of Hunter Biden on Twitter.
Right. It reminds me, and to your point that it has never changed, this was the story of the white South, that political leaders convinced poor whites that, as crappy as their lives were because the governance was so bad, they were at least better off than the next people down the rung. And the next people down the rung were people who were not white. And that same mentality has just never changed. There was a great article, I'm going to blank on where it came from, but it was really an in-depth look at how Germany has dealt with the legacy of the Holocaust, what has become a monument, how they have tried to teach that to their children, the inevitable controversies that come across, what's the best way to do it, is the act of making a monument itself trivializing. It was a fascinating piece, in large part because I said, we don't have these problems because we never did it. We have never taken the legacy of slavery, of the original sin, seriously enough to figure out how to deal with it in a national way. And should anyone bring it up, they're accused of being woke, they're accused of making whites feel bad. The whole lost cause nonsense has continued to this day. And because we've never had this reckoning, there are millions of people who do not believe that there's any legacy of slavery, any legacy of discrimination. And what's more, they don't feel that their actions, frankly, matter. They don't see their fellow Americans as anyone other than people just like them. And I dare say, I think our Supreme Court feels the same way. So it's not like they have a great role model in many people. They're elected leaders, and their Supreme Court parrots, frankly, some of these mindsets and blind spots. But I do think, one of my favorite moments of this presidency was when Biden went to Tulsa, and he really told the story of, they weren't race riots, it was massacre in Tulsa.
Mass murder.
Yep. And people of my age, we were never taught this in the schools. I learned about Tulsa relatively recently. In any other country, this would have been a thing. This would have been marked as something that people were taught about. And that's just like the tip of the tiniest, little smidgen of the iceberg. And it is a sense also that the president does matter and decency does matter. How many people did Biden educate by doing that? By people saying, hey, what was that all about? I never learned about that. So I am always torn between, looking at the monumental stupidity, close-mindedness, cruelty, and then seeing how these small episodes do give one hope, do bring some light, do make your conscience feel that there is a force of goodness in the world, and that maybe it will come out on top some of the time, at least. So it's, I think we're all very torn between a desire for optimism, to look at people who are decent in government or who are even extremely skilled. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is, phenomenal. She has had a career like no other American, certainly no other woman. And seeing what a force for good she has been, how she's changed the Democratic Party, how she's changed the country. And yet she's going to hand over the gavel to these morons who are, it would be like the Yankees handing, the bat over to the worst little league bad news bear team, they could find. That's the gap in competence, the gap in moral standard. You can't get higher and you can't get lower in American politics, frankly.
Right. And I think actually, as you say, the hope lies in between those two extremes. And the beautiful thing about that is we don't even know who the next Speaker of the House is going to be, but we do know that he is going to be a moron and is going to be terrible. So thankfully, it looks like the margin's tiny no matter what. It might get smaller depending on what happens with George Santos. But
yes,
the basic message there is that leaders matter. Leadership matters. And that is the only concession I'm willing to make to some small percentage of Republican voters who put their trust in their leaders with their vote and are told masks are bad, vaccines are bad. I mean, if you trust somebody, you're going to listen to them if they're leading your state or your country, right? And that's why I do hope that we're seeing a shift towards that level of understanding in terms of not just policy, but who do we want to be? What do we want this country to be? Because as you so rightly point out, we've never addressed the underlying issues that lead us to this moment. And that kind of brings me to Twitter, because the lack of historical understanding, our refusal to teach American history to everybody allows for places like Twitter, which claim to be public spaces, to spread the hatred. I mean, we saw in the first 12 hours of Musk taking over and lifting all sorts of bans, the use of the N-word increased by like 500%. Yes. The instances of anti-Semitism are absolutely through the roof. It has become an unregulated, quite frankly, nasty place to be. And it's not like it was an easy place to be before, but you kind of had some sense that there was at least some semblance of understanding the importance of not letting hatred run rampant. So I think what happens with Twitter, I know it's not the hugest social media platform, but it does matter as an aggregator of news, as a place for community. So I'm wondering, like, what you see ahead, and what is not just necessary, but what's possible there.
I start with the observation that Elon Musk is representative of the white genius phenomenon in American history, where we attribute great powers to these people who may have, frankly made money by a combination of luck or timing or other things,
Inheritance.
who don't necessarily have the competency in one area that they would like to have in another. And this fascination, this assumption of greatness that we all place in these people, whether it's Donald Trump or whether it's Elon Musk or any other one of these people, that the assumptions we make and the implied goodwill that they have simply because they're white rich guys is really kind of striking. It's stunning. Yeah. That's how Tesla gets to be so completely overvalued that, it can lose 70% when they start figuring out the guy who's leading it is a little bit, whacked. Look at the valuation of Tesla. Where does that come from?
It
comes from this genius phenomenon. It's not worth more than General Motors and Chrysler and a bunch of other companies combined. It's absurd.
And now it's worth much less because
it's worth much less. So there is a consolation prize here. But to Twitter, you're exactly right. There used to be a grown-up there. A grown-up, at least you could complain to. A grown-up that was trying, however imperfectly, to try to clamp down on kind of the worst of it. And that if things got, really horrific, someone would step in. They actually stepped in fairly well before the 2020 election, not after on January 6th, but before in the run-up, and that was a good thing. But now it's become, as you say, this degenerating kind of cesspool. And Elon Musk has this advantage that very few other businesses have, which is that there's not a good competing alternative. Right. And we've all talked about this. If you don't like Starbucks, you can go to, Tea Leaf and Coffee, or you can go to, one of the other coffee shops. If you don't like Honda, there's Toyota. If you don't like really any other product, there is usually some alternative that you can look to that you say, well, maybe I liked Starbucks coffee better, but hey, this place is pretty good and I think I can live with it. There is no other Twitter that operates in this same way. Now, it may be because Twitter is an uneconomical platform. It has been losing money for a long time, and that may explain why no one else wants to do one or, duplicate it exactly the same way. But the idea of kind of a public space that has, yes, free speech, but not insanity. I sometimes think, if this had been, 20, 30 years ago in the UK, there would have been BBC Twitter. There would have been, or PBS Twitter. There would have been a sense that this is a public good, and therefore we have to invest in it. What a concept. Public good, paying for things that we need, having a modicum of regulation so that the least of us are not the most hurt and the most vulnerable. So that ship, unfortunately, has sailed. There is no PBS Twitter. And with the Republicans, there may not even be PBS after a few years. So,
oh, boy.
What do you do? Many of us are just rooting for him to fail. And frankly, his ability to lose money for Tesla by demonstrating his complete unfitness for grown-up dumb may be a blessing in disguise. Either he will have to go actually deal with Tesla, or he will be forced by investors and others to really limit or even sell Tesla and Twitter rather, and thereby, leave us all alone, thank God.
Yeah.
But he really does, talking about the problem is not Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a symptom. The same problem is the Elon Musk, the mad, genius, although actually at one point, maybe he's still, I don't think anyone doubts Elon Musk is a very smart person who can actually do things, but who has...
I'm not so sure, but...
Well, he made PayPal. PayPal actually is a great thing that he built.
Forgot about that.
Yeah, I mean, that was like the best thing he ever did. It's been downhill since then. So, you got to wonder, is his lifespan as a public figure, like Trump, have a natural arc that's going to diminish, and people are just going to get sick of the act and sick of the charade and move on. But all these people have the exact same characteristics. You must find this fascinating as someone who studies, psychology. They all have the same narcissism. They all have the same affection for right-wing dictatorship. They all have this sense of cruelty. They all have a complete sense of unawareness. I mean, it is remarkable how similar this profile is as you go across all of these people. And, I come back to this question, as you put it, what's next? Or how can it be better? Or where are we going? And I think, there's never one answer.
Right.
One answer is government should actually do its job, like examining what the Chinese are doing in Twitter and how much they've invested and whether their financial contribution has led to some kind of, pattern of behavior. And why isn't Elon Musk perhaps registered as a foreign agent for Russia if he is constantly, spewing
their Qatar or Saudi Arabia?
So there is actually a role for government. There's a role for government in monopoly policing, in speech policing, in transparency. Government do its job. And obviously, we're not going to get any of that with a Republican Congress. But I would hope if Democrats have an aspiration to once more control both House of Congress and the White House, that this would become an issue, that we have to begin to take charge of our public spaces, our social media spaces. And there's nothing wrong. There's nothing socialistic about that. There's nothing, inherently anti-democratic. To the contrary, we're now dependent upon the EU to regulate Twitter because we don't do it ourselves. That's how bad it's gotten. So that's one part of it. Another part of it is individuals have to decide whether they want to buy Teslas, whether they want to financially support this person.
I think the answer is a resounding no thus far.
Yes, exactly. So, or fewer and fewer are deciding that they want to supply, him with some financial wherewithal. So it's that, it's advertisers, it's, it's not a very satisfying answer to say that this is an overdetermined problem and there's no one solution. And there is a little bit of this Alphonse and Gaston routine, you go first government, no, you go first, consumer, no, you go first advertiser. But I think until there is some bright white focus on this, bright light shined on this, nothing's going to be done. And I would hope that Senate Democrats start having at least hearings on this, at least examining the funding, the transparency, the algorithmic damage that is being done. Let them do their job. We actually have hearings, as we learned from January 6th, that can be productive, that we can learn things from, that reveal facts that are not, something just a blatherfest for the people who are on the dais there, but who work to inform and hopefully improve. So I really hope the Senate Democrats do not spend their time simply creating lovely bills that go nowhere because the House has decided to do nothing, and that they don't, simply be on defense for Hunter Biden or whoever else, but that they go on offense, that they start doing their jobs more effectively. And I, for one, was so pleasantly surprised by the January 6th committee, made effective, of course, because the Republicans were absent. Thank you very much, Kevin McCarthy. But even with simply a majority in the Senate, you can get stuff done. You can find out information. And I guess that's where I would start for 2023, is let Congress start doing their job. We need transparency. We need to put people under oath. We need to have some expert testimony on a whole array of issues. We need to look at the landscape in Europe. What is Europe able to do that we don't? Is that completely incompatible with our First Amendment? Are there things that we can do? And I would like at least to start there. I know that's naive. I know that's expecting the public sector to actually function. I know it's expecting people to be adults, but what am I? Just a wide-eyed optimist. And I do think maybe not perfectly, but imperfectly it's possible.
Well, listen, we can't be in despair all the time. And as you said at the beginning, there were a lot of wins in not just in 2022, but in 2020 and 2021 as well. So, I think that gets lost sometimes when I often think I can't imagine, I never would have been able to imagine that things would be worse 2 years after November 2020 than they were before November 2020. But I think the midterms really did turn that around for me. And I think between that and the extraordinary effectiveness, shortcomings aside, of the work the January 6th Select Committee did, I'd like to think that Democrats are empowered. I know that enough Democrats, people like Jamie Raskin, for example, understand the threat to American democracy in a very powerful way. And I think when, one of the best things that came out of the January 6th committee was that the people involved saw the degree to which so many people were willing to destroy this country, to steal an election, and that we cannot, and that we're still under that threat. So, if we can regulate broadcast media, so like you can't swear on primetime sitcoms, I find it ridiculous to say that we can't regulate a social media platform that could literally swing the results of elections if left to its own devices. So I don't think it's naive. I don't even think it's overly optimistic. But one other thing you said that really resonates with me, and I think is what you and I, because we're just going to solve everything right here, right now. But that seriously, that democracy loving Americans and pro-democracy politicians need to do is figure this out on an individual level. So yes, not only is it remarkable that all of the people who seem to be presenting the greatest danger, like Donald and Elon Musk, et cetera, are almost to a person rich white men, or rich anyway, who suffer from serious narcissism and have been given a pass all of their lives. But what do we do about the tens of millions of people you mentioned earlier who, because of their own authoritarian leanings, continue to support these people? And that, I think that's where the shift happens, if it happens.
It does. And I would add to the good things that are happening, and one way to pierce this in a really closed world is lawsuits. And I am really looking at the Dominion voting lawsuit.
Oh, so much fun.
To hear these Fox News personalities say, oh yeah, I never believed a thing I was saying on air. Yeah, I just thought my audience were a bunch of dopes.
Yeah.
This has an educational value, obviously, in revealing what a racket this is.
Yep.
What a money-making, cold-blooded operation is that would sacrifice democracy, would sacrifice people's lives for the almighty buck. And excuse me, as a child of a family of immigrants, really, has Rupert Murdoch no appreciation for the country that took him in? Is he really such an ingrate that he could have come to this country, made his millions, had fame beyond his wild imagination, and then turn around and screw democracy? Yes, unfortunately, he's that kind of person, because he's another white crazy billionaire who's been given a pass all his life. So there we are. I think at the as we kind of ease our way into the next year, I do think that the possibilities, you touched on this, like how do we get to people? It's not necessarily going to be all one thing. It's going to happen in smaller ways and in lots of different ways. Part of what makes their attack on education and educators so scary is that's where we're going to save the next generation. And they get that. They understand that if they can block out reality from the next generation, then maybe they can hang on. And I think we have to really expand our notion of what public education means. It's not necessarily, smoking campaign where there's a bulletin board on, or there's a poster on your bus stop. We have to really think about how we all communicate culturally, socially, politically with other Americans. And again, call me naive. Biden's Christmas message was so unbelievably sweet and really asking us for our better angels, to not look at one another as, creepy partisans, and to do the kind thing, do the right thing. Gosh, if we had a million of them, a million Bidens as opposed to a million Elon Musks, we'd be in, much better shape. But I do think in some sense, we're very lucky to have Biden at this moment in time. We were very lucky, dare I say, to have Liz Cheney at this moment in time. And we were very lucky in some sense to have, a functional enough government to make it work. And maybe that's kind of what we have to shoot for. Functional enough. At least one house able to have hearings, at least a president able to communicate a sane message. And, we'll stumble along and stumble through. And politics is always at the margin. It's a 1 or 2% shift. And suddenly the Democrats really do have both houses and the White House. So working at the margins for good enough. I know this sounds like such low expectations, but isn't all life like this?
Well, D.W. Winnicott, a British psychologist, came up with the concept of being a good enough mother. You didn't have to be perfect. You needed to be present when you could be. You didn't, as long as you weren't awful, you just needed to be good enough. So I think that's a really good way of looking at it, because if you're good enough, then you can get better. And we see, there are problems. We prioritize the wrong thing. In this country, Fox News makes money, or Fox News, I don't think does make money, but Rupert Murdoch makes money because people like scandal and people like cruelty, and same thing with Musk, or at least, it generates attention in ways that being kind doesn't, which is something about the human condition, I guess we need to figure out. But if we, as you say, focus on the fundamentals, we can, I don't think we can change a lot in the short term, but we can educate people to understand why education is so important, why we need to teach our children history and civics, not during junior year in high school, but throughout their lives. Exactly. So they feel connected to the political process and really understand what it means in their day-to-day lives to be part of that process. We need to teach media literacy and critical thinking. So that's good. And we need to respect the profession of teaching. Yes. Just as we need to start reminding people to respect the profession of doctors and scientists and all of that other stuff. And along with that, we have already examples in what happens when you don't do any of that. Like Florida is a perfect closed lab of what happens when you have in charge somebody who disdains any of what we were just talking about. So maybe those two things together will function in the same way. You know, a Democratic-led Senate doing good things is juxtaposed against a Republican-led House, which is just basically be clowning itself at every opportunity.
I've always wanted Democrats to run ads in red states saying, why is your state so cruddy? You could be like us.
Yeah.
Why do you put up with this?
Yeah.
You could have a public education system that works. You too could have public transportation. You too could have good health. What's the matter with you guys? You know, this sense that, don't you aspire to something better for you and your children? Come on. And, you know.
Can I just interrupt for a second? Because I think that that's so important. Democrats need to let people know that they think that fighting for things that are good, fighting for kindness, fighting for education, fighting for fairness and anti-racism and all of that stuff is worth fighting for as hard as the right fights for hatred and anti-Semitism and misogyny and ignorance. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
It would be. And what's even weirder is that we want it because it's those people who would benefit the most. We already have good education in Minnesota and Massachusetts. That's not the problem. Silly old us, we're trying to improve the lives of people who have rotten governance back home, who have corruption, who have, you know, really feeble people like Ron DeSantis running their state. So no one expects us to give us a gold star for that. But I just point to the irony of the fact that we care more about them than they care about them.
It's true. It could like that could be a commercial. It's like, I want you guys to have healthcare and I want your children to grow up in a safe environment and you want me dead.
Yes.
All right.
Exactly.
So, Jen, we're coming to the end of our time together today, and I just kind of wanted to ask you before. Well, I have two questions. Just quickly, sort of your highlights and lowlights of 2022, and you touched on that a little bit, like, but your one or two biggest ones, and your your how should I put this? The thing you're most looking forward to in 2023?
Well, the thing I'm most looking forward to are those criminal indictments of Donald Trump, and I think they're coming. It's going to be like Festivus. It's
January 6th. I want them.
Yes, it's going to be just great when he starts getting those criminal indictments and he has to have a mug shot and all the rest of it. That's going to be glorious. So I really am looking forward to that. I think the highlights of 2022, God, it's hard to, like, as soon as you get used to 1 year and you learn to, like, we used to say, put it on our checks, but people don't know what checks are. Like, we're on to another year. But anyway, in the year gone by, I have to say, Biden rising to the occasion in pushing through a spate of legislation after everyone had written him off and really leading the charge in the run up to the midterms on democracy was really simply a great relief, a great source of relief, and a good reminder that the professional pundits and scourges and scolds really don't know what's going on any more than the rest of us, and give people a little bit of credit. So that would be, the one thing. Yeah. And I think the other highlight, which is both a highlight and a low light, is Ukraine. What a magnificent people, what bravery, what human determination in the midst of hellish conditions, really, the world has not seen since World War II and worse. These people have sustained themselves, and they have a small d democratic president who refers to our legacy. He comes and talks to us about Saratoga, about our troops on D-Day. I'm sure more people in America now know what the Battle of Saratoga was about than they did before he came. So thank goodness for small favors. But I think many people have observed that in helping them and admiring them, we come back to reaffirming our better angels, and to be on the side of right and decency and freedom for people who are suffering terribly, terribly.
Yeah.
And so that was both a highlight, I think, and a low light. And I guess along with my hope that Donald will see the criminal justice system up close, my other hope would be that either the Russians get rid of Putin or the Ukrainians get rid of Putin, and we
Yep.
move on from this hellish experience in Europe that we thought was a relic of the 1940s.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. And the other, I hate putting it in these terms, but it happens to be true that the situation in Ukraine, which is to say Russia's illegal invasion of a sovereign nation, strengthened the Western alliance in a way maybe nothing else could have, especially after the damage Donald did to it. So,
I would agree.
Right? So that's not nothing. For sure. One last question. You, Jen Rubin, have been an honorary Nerd Avenger for quite some time now. And I'd like to make it official. You don't have to answer now. I know it's a very serious thing to contemplate, but I would like to make you officially a Nerd Avenger. If you want, it'll mean more emails from me. All right. Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Hooray.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
So
and I have to thank you, and your regular and irregular guests, a voice of sanity, a voice of intellectual clarity and moral sanity. We all need to have that boost in reaffirming that we are not the crazy ones. We are not insane. We are not making this up. So thank you, Mary, and all of your folks and the people that make this program possible and the guests that come on. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And thank you for your work. I mean, it's really been an inspiration for me long before I met you to see your journey. Because it's been a tough few years for people to witness what's been going on and have to make hard decisions that you probably never thought you'd have to make, right? So your journey, your writing always illuminates things for me. So Jen Rubin, again, thank you so much for spending the very last 2022 Mary Trump show with me. Happy New Year, and you'll be hearing from me much more often now that you're officially a Nerd Avenger.
Same to you.
All right, stay safe. Bye. That was fabulous. Thank you so much to Jennifer Rubin, officially now Nerd Avenger. Jennifer Rubin. She needs to get business cards that say that. And thank you to all of you. I am so grateful to have the show. I'm so grateful to everybody who watches. It really keeps me motivated. It's been a tough year. I'm really tired of saying that. Hold me to this. I don't want to say that next year. Next year, I want to say 2023 was awesome, and I can't wait for 2024. So as it stands now, I'm very happy to see the back of 2022, but I am looking forward to 2023. We have a lot in store for you here at the Mary Trump Show, about which we will keep you posted. So again, thank you for your time and your commitment to us. Thank you to all of my just amazing guests. I mean, I've had some just incredible people on this show, and my Nerd Avengers, whom I love. So that wraps it up for tonight. We will be back for the very first Mary Trump Show Nerd Avengers of 2023 on Tuesday. I think it's January 3rd at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. That's at youtube.com/Politicon. And I'm actually not entirely sure what's happening on Thursday yet. So I will keep you posted. So when you are on Politicon's YouTube page, please subscribe to Politicon channel. Like the episode, leave a comment there, click on that bell right there, and you will be sure to be notified anytime a new video drops. And of course, you can listen to the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, etc. Not Shopify. We still don't do Shopify, and we probably never will. A 5-star review would be incredible because it really helps other people find the show. And I think that is it for the show and for 2022. Thank you again so much. And until Tuesday, first of all, Happy New Year. Don't do anything crazy. And in the meantime, please stay safe and be kind.